Caleb had one thing left from his family's legacy: a well that ran deeper than just water. But when a polished HOA president named Evelyn Parker showed up with a smile and a cement truck, everything changed overnight. What they didn't know: Caleb's estranged cousin, the one with old grudges and new power, controls the state's water laws. Now buried truths are rising, one document at a time. And this quiet man on the edge of town is about to shake the very foundation of his neighborhood. This isn't about water, it's about control, legacy, and the one line you don't cross. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. I never thought I'd miss the creak of an old pulley echoing through the morning air. It wasn't anything special, just a sound, worn and familiar, like the sigh of an old friend who never left your side. That pulley had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. Rusted over in spots, wrapped in rope that my father used to call war-tested, it hung over the well behind my house like a sentinel. I grew up here, out on the edge of town where the highway fades into cottonwood groves and birdsong fills in the silences. My parents built this place with their hands. 2 bedrooms, white siding, a porch that sags a little on the right side, but holds strong in a storm. It's not perfect, not polished, but it's mine. The well out back wasn't just a piece of plumbing, it was our lifeline. It watered Mom's garden, cooled Dad's forehead after long days fixing fences, and filled my canteen before bike rides that stretched until sundown. I remember lowering the bucket down myself as a kid, waiting to hear the splash, then yanking it up with both hands, legs braced, rope sliding through my fingers. I felt strong back then, useful. Things have changed. Not just the pulley or the paint on the siding, but everything. The neighborhood started to swell a few years ago. People from the city moved in with their shiny hybrids and compost bins, looking for quiet country charm. Developers bought up the West Field and turned it into what they call Crescent Oaks, with matching mailboxes and dog waste stations every 50 yards. Don't get me wrong, they're not bad folks, but they brought something else with them: rule. That's when Evelyn Parker appeared. A trim, well-put-together woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and sharper intentions. She was elected HOA president within a month of moving in. Some people just move like they own the place. She walked the block like a mayor campaigning for re-election, knocking on doors with a smile and a clipboard, taking notes no one asked her to take. At first she kept her distance, until she did. I was out front stacking firewood when she first brought it up. My well, she smiled the whole time, polite as could be. I noticed your property still uses a private well, she said. You know, the HOA encourages full compliance with municipal systems now. There are liability concerns. Liability. That's the word they use when they want to gut something quietly. I told her it was grandfathered in. She raised one eyebrow, like a teacher correcting a student who should have known better. Technically, it still violates Article 9B of our covenant agreement. You should have received the latest update. I hadn't, but that didn't seem to matter. I didn't push back, not then. I just nodded, brushed the wood chips off my hands, and watched her walk away in her spotless running shoes like she'd just done me a favor. I figured maybe it would blow over. Maybe it was just another neighborly nudge, but deep down I knew that wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. And as I stood there on that quiet road, the weight of her words heavy in the air, I heard it again, that old pulley creaking in the wind. Only this time, it sounded like a warning. The envelope was pale yellow, too clean for this place. No name, just a barcode, and a sticker that read "Urgent, HOA Compliance Notice." I found it tucked under a brick on my porch one morning, right next to the boots I'd left out overnight. I don't know why, but I didn't open it right away. Maybe I knew what it would say. Maybe I hoped that if I left it long enough, it would just stop being real. I finally opened it over breakfast. Inside was a single page with language so cold it almost burned. You are hereby instructed to decommission your private well within 14 days to remain in compliance with HOA Covenant Code 9B. Subsection 3. Failure to comply will result in daily fines and potential enforcement measures. No dear resident, no signature, just black ink on white paper. Like a death certificate for something still alive. I took a breath and folded it back up, like it might go away, if I was careful enough. Then I looked out the window at the well, standing there like it always had. Solid. Stubborn. Mine. That night, I went to the HOA meeting. It was held in the new community center they'd built where the old maple grove used to be. LED lights, free coffee, tables lined with handouts about dog waste disposal and lawn fertilizer limits. It all smelled faintly of plastic and disinfectant. I wasn't even sure if I was allowed to speak, but when the floor opened for questions, I stood. "My name's Caleb," I said. "My family's lived here for 3 generations. That well's been in use since before the town had plumbing. I rely on it. It's legal under state law, and I've kept it up myself for years." I wasn't loud. I wasn't angry. I just asked. Ellen Parker didn't look up right away. She was flipping through a folder like she already knew what I'd say. Then she smiled. Measured, polite, surgical. "Thank you for your comment, Mr. Caleb," she said, resting her manicured hands on the table. "But we can't make exceptions for nostalgia." Her voice was smooth as glass, the kind that cracks without warning. I looked around the room, 20 faces staring at tables. A few fidgeted. No one met my eye. I wanted anyone, to speak up, to say he's right, to say this isn't fair. But all I got was silence. Ellen moved on like I hadn't even spoken. Later, as I stepped outside into the cool night, I heard someone behind me mutter, "Shame about the well." When I turned, they were already walking away. The next morning, I walked out to the pump, ran my hand along the old wood casing, lowered the bucket to let it drop. Splash. Pulled it up. Cold water. Clear. Still here. I looked toward Evelyn's new house down the road. Perfect paint, matching shutters, fresh sod that didn't quite take. Something about it all felt temporary, forced. Mine wasn't pretty, but it was real. And I knew this wasn't about water. It wasn't even about a rule. It was about control. About someone trying to make this place into something it was never meant to be. That notice? That wasn't the beginning of a conversation. It was the start of a warning. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because the feed store was running a discount on grain mix, and I'd driven into town earlier than usual, got lunch at the counter diner, turkey melt cup of black coffee, and lingered longer than I normally would. There was a storm building in the air, but not the kind that shows up in the forecast. I pulled into the drive just after 2 p.m., tires crunching over gravel. From a distance, I could already tell something wasn't right. The yard was too still. No birds. No creak from the old pulley in the wind. Just quiet. Then I saw it. The well. My family's well. Our anchor, our memory, our lifeline was gone. In its place stood a flat slab of concrete, still damp around the edges. Bright gray against the dirt. Unapologetic. Unmoving. No rope, no bucket, no pulley. Just a freshly poured tomb. At its base sat a laminated note taped to a wooden stake, barely swaying in the breeze. Action taken in accordance with Article 12.3, non-compliant water source neutralized under emergency provision. That word neutralized hit harder than I expected. Like my well had been a threat. Like water from the earth was somehow dangerous. I stood there for a long time. I didn't move, didn't curse, didn't call anyone. I just stared. And in that silence, memories flooded in without permission. My mother's voice, humming as she filled a tin watering can from the bucket. My father's calloused hands showing me how to check the rope for wear. My own voice, shouting into the well as a kid just to hear the echo bounce back. They were all there, just beneath the concrete, buried alive. I don't remember walking back inside, but I do remember the red light blinking on the answering machine. One new voicemail. It was Evelyn. Her voice was, as always, pleasant. Almost soothing if you weren't listening to the content. "Mr. Caleb," the board proceeded with resolution per outline protocol. "We acted in the best interest of the community. Let's move forward peacefully. No emotion, no apology, just policy wrapped in honey." I replayed it twice, then I deleted it. It didn't need to exist. The next morning, I walked out with a folding chair and sat by the well. Correction, by the slab. I couldn't call it a well anymore. It was. I sipped coffee from my thermos and waited. Not for anyone in particular, just to see what the day would do with something so wrong and so quiet. Neighbors walked their dogs like nothing had happened. A few looked over, then quickly away. No one waved. The HOA landscaper came by around noon. I watched him from my chair. He took measurements near the slab, then made notes on a clipboard. I didn't ask what for. I already knew. They were planning something. Maybe a flower bed. Maybe a signpost about shared space. Maybe nothing at all, just erasure. By evening, I finally stood, walked up to the slab, and placed my hand flat on the center. It was still warm from the sun. I felt the faintest pulse beneath it, like memory radiating upward. I whispered, "I'm sorry. Not to the well, to my parents, to the land, to myself for thinking decency would be enough." This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't miscommunication. It was intentional. They'd erased something sacred and expected me to just fold into the silence like it had never mattered. But silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the sound of something gathering. You don't call someone after 5 years without thinking about it first. Not when the last words between you were about lawyers and land, and not when the silence that followed got louder with each passing year. But I was out of options. The concrete was set. The town had moved on. Evelyn had her hand firmly on the wheel. And me, I was still sitting in the shadow of what used to be a well, holding on to memories and county maps like they were going to save me. That's when Ethan's name came back to me. We were more like brothers once. Summers at the lake. Sneaking into the barn to smoke one of Dad's old cigars like it made us men. But things splintered after Grandpa died. His will split the land in a way that didn't sit right with either of us. Words were said, legal threats made, and then nothing. Still, blood's blood. And sometimes, you reach for it even when it's dried and crusted over. I found his number in an old email thread. My thumb hovered over the call button longer than I care to admit. When he picked up, his voice was deeper than I remembered. Measured. Professional. Ethan speaking. I didn't expect him to answer. For a second, I thought about hanging up. "Hey, it's Caleb." Silence. Just long enough for me to wonder if he was going to pretend he didn't know me. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, letting out a short breath. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the slab. Didn't think I'd ever need to call. We didn't talk about Grandpa, or the land, or the lawyers. Not at first. We made small talk like strangers at a bus stop, polite, awkward, aware of the weight between us. Then I asked him what he was doing these days. "State Water Board," he said. "Deputy Director." The words hung there, heavy. "You're kidding." "Nope, been with them 6 years. Moved up quicker than I expected." I didn't say anything for a while. I think he could feel the shift through the line. "Why'd you call, Caleb?" I looked back at the well. At the rope that used to hang there. At the spot in the garden where Mom's hydrangeas used to bloom. They poured concrete in the well. Another pause. Not long, but just enough. "Who did?" The HOA claimed it violated code. He didn't curse. Didn't gasp. Just the low sound of a pen being set down on a desk. "Do you still have your old records? Deed? Water rights?" "Most of it. Somewhere." He exhaled. "Good. Send them to me. All of it. I'll take a look." "Why?" "Because I work with this stuff every day. And because—" He stopped. Just for a beat. "Because we're family. Whether we like it or not." I didn't know what to say to that. Still don't. But for the first time since I found that damn notice on my porch, I felt something shift. Not hope exactly. But maybe the shape of it. They called it a transparency meeting. Nice word, transparency. Sounds like something clean. Open. Honest. The flyer showed up in mailboxes 2 days after Ethan and I spoke. Glossy cardstock with clip art trees, pastel colors, and a photo of Evelyn Parker smiling like she was running for state senate. "Please join the HOA for a special community update regarding water use, sustainability, and green space development. Light refreshments will be provided." I almost didn't go. I already knew it wouldn't be a conversation. It'd be a But sometimes you have to sit through a performance just to understand the script. The meeting was held at the same community center where she'd cut me off before. Now there were folding chairs set in neat rows, tables of lemonade and organic cookies, and a slideshow loop playing pictures of native plants and recycled rain barrels. Evelyn stood at the front, framed by a projector screen, wearing a powder blue blazer and that same practiced smile. She began with thank yous, paused for applause that no one asked for, then eased into her speech like she'd done it 100 times. In light of recent actions regarding non-compliant infrastructure, she said, we'd like to clarify the board's motives and provide vision for what comes next. She never said the word well, just non-compliant infrastructure. Like it had never held water or memory or meaning. Like it had never been mine. She clicked to the next slide, a rendering of a fenced-in space with raised beds, benches, and a cheerful sign reading Crescent Oaks Community Garden. A sustainable future starts here. Right where the well used to be. The room gave a few polite claps. I stood up. That land isn't yours to redesign. Eyes turned, some surprised, a few embarrassed. Evelyn didn't flinch. We appreciate your perspective, Mr. Caleb, she said, with the tone of a kindergarten teacher correcting a child. But the HOA is well within its rights to repurpose underutilized space. It wasn't underutilized. It was mine. A low silence followed. Not tense. Just quiet. Like no one wanted to get involved. Evelyn nodded as if I'd just proven her point. Unfortunately, the well was deemed a liability, potential contamination, outdated systems. The community's safety must come first. She smiled again. Smooth, polished, weaponized. I didn't push further. Not there. Not in that room filled with folding chairs and neighbors who refused to meet my eyes. Instead, I walked out before the meeting ended. On my way past the front table, I noticed a stack of handouts labeled Next Steps. I took one. The final line read, community progress requires sacrifice, but from sacrifice comes shared growth. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about safety, or rules, or water. This was about erasure, about planting something new to make people forget what had been there before. It was about power, land, and legacy. They wanted to pave over my past and call it a garden, but I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. So I climbed the rickety pull-down stairs and ducked into the low-ceilinged heat with a flashlight, looking for a file cabinet I hadn't opened in more than a decade. There it was. Back corner, rusted handle, still locked. I found the key in Dad's old tackle box, right where he used to hide it. Some habits don't die with the man. The drawer groaned open like it resented being disturbed. Inside, folders, brittle and yellowed at the edges, but labeled in his tidy handwriting. Land. Original deed. Well maintenance, 1981. Water rights, 1946. State certified. My heart beat faster than it should have. I sat cross-legged on the floor and started flipping through papers. Everything was there. Surveys, boundary lines, typed letters from the State Water Board. Even an old black-and-white photo of my grandfather standing beside the newly dug well, arms crossed like he was daring time to challenge him. The date on the water rights certificate, June, stamped, sealed, filed with the county courthouse. It predated the HOA charter by nearly 40 years. Legally, the well wasn't just allowed, it was protected. No covenant, no neighborhood vote, no flowery language about community gardens could undo that. But that wasn't even the most important thing I found. Near the back of the folder, clipped to a survey map, was an annexation agreement from 1964. Signatures at the bottom. My grandfather's, a notary's, and another name I didn't expect. Edward M. Parker, Evelyn's grandfather. And scribbled in the margin, in a different pen, different handwriting, were coordinates and notes adjusting the property boundary lines. Lines that, if I was reading correctly, moved the border 30 feet east, 30 feet into our land. I traced it with my finger. The annexation was never finalized with the state. Just recorded locally. Quietly, just enough to redraw neighborhood maps over time, until nobody questioned where Evelyn's side of the fence stood. Except now I had proof. Her family hadn't just fought to erase my well. They had buried their own wrongdoing beneath generations of quiet paperwork and suburban smiles. I leaned back against the attic wall, folder resting on my lap. It wasn't just about a well anymore. This was about the land, the history, the story they'd rewritten while folks like my father were too busy working and trusting to notice. And now Evelyn was trying to cement that lie into permanence, covered in mulch and planted petunias. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even revenge. Resolve. I gathered everything. Deed water rights, the annexation file, survey maps, and my grandfather's photo. Put them in a box, labeled it in thick black marker. Well and property, legal, do not toss. The next morning, I scanned every document and sent them to Ethan. Subject line. Thought you'd want to see this. I didn't say much in the body of the email. Didn't need to, because now I had more than memories. More than grief. More than quiet defiance. Now I had evidence. I sent the documents just before midnight. Didn't write much in the email. No long explanation. Just attached the scans, typed, "Found what you asked for. Let me know." The next morning, my phone rang before the coffee was done brewing. "Why the hell didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan's voice was sharp, clipped. Not angry at me exactly. Angry at the weight of it all. The history, the silence, the fact that something so big had been allowed to happen in broad daylight. "I thought it was just a neighborhood dispute," I said. "Didn't know it went that deep until I started digging." "Well, you dug up a gold mine." He was pacing on his end. I could hear it, floorboards creaking, door opening, shutting. The sounds of movement. "That annexation document alone is a bomb," he said. "Your water rights are solid. She broke state code by sealing a protected well, violated 2 separate statutes, minimum. And if she built that boundary illegally decades ago, that's land fraud." I didn't speak for a moment. I just stared out at the well, the slab still there, still mocking me. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Ethan said, voice firm, "I open an investigation." It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it landed like a gavel on a courtroom bench. By noon, he'd submitted a quiet but official inquiry to the State Water Board's Enforcement Division. No press conferences. Just bureaucracy moving under the surface, methodical, slow, and unstoppable. By Friday, I started noticing things. HOA board members looking a little twitchier during their morning walks. A couple of lawn signs quietly disappearing. Evelyn's cheerful little newsletters stopped showing up. The landscaper who'd been measuring the ground for the garden, gone. No one replaced him. And Evelyn, she was still polished, still smiling, still hosting composting workshops and dropping off pamphlets about water-saving tips in decorative envelopes. But something cracked behind her eyes. You had to look close, but it was there. A flicker of tightness in her jaw. The way her smile held just a second too long. She knew something was moving beneath her feet. One afternoon I passed her near the mailbox cluster. She offered a smile, just like always. "Lovely weather, isn't it?" "It is," I said. "Unpredictable though. Storm's been building." Her lips twitched, half amusement, half warning. Neither of us said anything else. I walked back to my porch and sat by the well. The slab hadn't moved, but everything else had. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the only one still fighting. The tide had turned, and it was carrying something with it. The letter came from the State Water Board's legal division, certified and stamped. I didn't see it delivered, but I heard about it from 2 different directions the same afternoon. The first was Mr. Glenn from across the street, retired, keeps to himself. The second was the teenager who walks dogs on our block after school. Both said the same thing. Evelyn Parker had been served. A cease and desist order, formal language, clear findings. The state confirmed it all. The illegal sealing of a protected water source, failure to obtain environmental clearance, and historic zoning fraud dating back nearly 6 decades. Turns out land doesn't forget, and neither does paper. By the time the letter reached her, the board had already started holding private meetings. Quiet, unofficial ones. The kind where no coffee is served. She didn't fight it. No press release. No dramatic scene. Evelyn Parker resigned from the HOA within 72 hours of the notice being delivered. She called it a personal decision, said she needed more balance in her life. But on her final day, clipboard tucked under one arm, lips tight, she made a point of walking right up to my porch. I was trimming the hedge. I didn't stop. "You got what you wanted," she said, flat but poised. I glanced up, said nothing. "But don't fool yourself into thinking this is over." She added, "Power doesn't need to shout to stay in control. It just needs to endure." She smiled then, brittle, like the last leaf clinging to a dying branch. I let her have the last word. She seemed like the kind who needed it. Later that week, I noticed the change. Not big, not loud, but present. People started nodding again when they walked by. Small talk returned, weather, local elections, even a comment about the flowers coming up near my fence line. One of the HOA board members, a woman named Carla who'd always kept her distance, brought over a pie, didn't say much, just handed it to me, nodded once, and left. Not everyone came around. Some still looked the other way. I didn't blame them. It's hard to look at something you ignored for so long and admit you should have spoken up. But enough people did. And that mattered. The well was still sealed, for now, but the order to reverse the damage had been filed. It would take weeks, maybe months, before it would be restored. Still, I could feel it. In the soil, in the air. The land was breathing again. Not because I fought harder, not because I shouted louder, but because I held the line long enough for the truth to rise. And sometimes, that's all it takes. They brought in a state crew the following week. 3 trucks, 2 inspectors, 1 contractor with a clipboard and sunburned arms. No fanfare. No cameras. Just quiet boots on dry ground and a slow, deliberate process of undoing what should never have been done. It took nearly a full day to break through the concrete. The slab didn't go easy. It fought the jackhammers, clung to the edges of the earth like it wanted to be permanent. But eventually it cracked, shattered in chunks, fell away, and underneath, like a buried lung relearning how to breathe, the well waited. They ran tests, checked water flow, made notes and nodded. By late afternoon, they lowered the bucket for the first time. It hit the surface with a sound I hadn't heard in months, a soft, distant splash that carried more weight than any court order ever could. When they gave me the green light, I stepped forward, rope in hand. I pulled slowly, felt the familiar weight rise through the pulley, the wood creaking overhead like it remembered me. Up came the water, cold, clear, and whole. I didn't say a word. Just stood there, hands damp, heart steady, listening to the echoes of the past pour into the present. Later that evening, Ethan showed up. No announcement, no horn, just his truck rolling to a stop in the driveway, tires crunching gravel like they used to when we were kids. He didn't bring files, didn't ask for updates. We sat on the porch, 2 chairs angled toward the well. The air smelled like earth again, like life. For a long while, we didn't speak. He looked at the well, elbows resting on his knees, eyes soft in a way I hadn't seen in years. Eventually, I broke the silence. Wasn't just about water. He nodded. It never is. We didn't need to say the rest. Not about Grandpa. Not about what was lost. Not even about what was found again. We'd fought something bigger than regulations. Bigger than boardrooms and clipped voices and artificial smiles. We'd fought erasure and won, not by shouting, but by remembering, by holding on. As the sky deepened into dusk, I glanced out toward the well. The rope swayed gently in the breeze, the pulley above it creaking in that same old rhythm. It didn't sound like a warning anymore. It sounded like home. I didn't feel victorious. I felt whole. If a story can be buried, it can also be unearthed. Ever faced a fight that felt too quiet to matter, until it didn't? Tell us what your well is, the thing worth standing for, even when no one's watching. Because sometimes, the quietest stories echo the loudest. And we're just getting started.